We put a bow on the conversation that is Geno Smith and what he can do for the Raiders as a starting quarterback in 2025. That plus more on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for July 9th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you. If you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast, or you're checking us out by way of the YouTube page, you know we appreciate both. The show continues to grow each and every day because of your consistent support and the great job that my man Ari does behind the scenes on the YouTube page, making sure we look good and sound good each and every day, and that's a tough job. And as a matter of fact, pat yourself on the back. 20,000 subscriptions on the Locked On Raiders podcast YouTube page. My man Ari passed that note along. So, again, shout out to you, Raider Nation, for that support. That is amazing. Between downloads and subscriptions to the YouTube page, man, we're cooking with grease, and we definitely appreciate that. So if you want to hit up Ari on Twitter, you can at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, you know, we've got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line for you, 707-654-4693. We'll hear from you, as a matter of fact, as we close out the show. Segment number 3, we do it pretty much every single day. Calls, texts, really good feedback on multiple conversations that we've had here in the last couple days and even the last few weeks here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So we'll hear from you coming up. Segment number 3. Segment number 2, had a really good conversation on my radio show on Tuesday with Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus. All things Geno Smith, as they've got a really good breakdown on their YouTube page right now about Geno Smith and the fact that his arm is going to open up the Raiders offense. So really good stuff, you know, unlocking the Raiders offense, really being dynamic and how good of a quarterback he can be, which is a fitting way to put a bow on the conversation that is Geno Smith. And we've been talking about who has the advantage in each and every game, you know, game 1 through game 17, week 1 through week 18, right? Who's going to have the advantage at the quarterback position? After talking to Max on Tuesday, well, I might change my mind about a couple of my thoughts when it came to who he has an advantage over or who he doesn't have an advantage over in 2025. And I'll tell you right now, it sounds really good for the Silver and Black. So you hear that conversation coming up in segment number 2. Again, it'll kind of put a bow on everything we've been talking about when it comes to Geno Smith. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes of the day, a note from ESPN, and you'll also hear Jason Horowitz, the voice of the Silver and Black, his thoughts on Geno Smith, as he also was a guest on my radio show on Tuesday. We'll get into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show. That's FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Of course, I'll tell you more about them later on in the show. But off top, let me tell you what ESPN had to say. Matter of fact, Ryan McFadden, he now holds the job of covering the Raiders for ESPN like Paul Gutierrez did for many years. Now Paul works for Raiders.com. Ryan McFadden is your Raiders reporter. So the ESPN on ESPN.com, they put out a piece on every team across the league, all 32, 2025 NFL offseason, biggest surprise players on each team. And you'll understand why I'm giving you this little information because, again, it all ties in to Geno Smith, as we've been talking about him in great extent here on the show. He said the biggest surprise for the Raiders, 4th-round pick, wide receiver, Dante Thornton Jr. He said the 4th-round pick made a strong case to be a day-one contributor for Las Vegas. Thornton received a good amount of reps with the first-team offense as his combination of size, 6'5", 205 pounds, and speed, 4'3", 40 at the combine, makes him a threat in the intermediate and deep passing game. This is something that stands out right here about Thornton. He says, at Tennessee, Thornton was known for his big playability, leading the nation in yards per catch at 25.4 and catches for 50-plus yards, 6. The Raiders didn't make a major move at the wide receiver position this offseason, meaning Thornton and second-round pick Jack Besh will be asked to step up in a big way in year 1. Thornton showed he could be ready to answer that call. Again, that's from Ryan McFadden, ESPN.com, talking about 2025 NFL offseason, biggest surprise players on each team. So, of course, a lot of people have heard about Dante Thornton Jr. I talked about him at mandatory minicamp where I saw that the Raiders were making an exact effort to get him the ball, get him involved. But what he points out, what Ryan McFadden points out about what he did at Tennessee, where he was averaging 25.4 yards per catch, right? That's big playability. We've talked about how training camp is going to be a very important one for Trey Tucker, who's got a lot of speed, but he has not established himself and what kind of position he has at the wide receiver position. Like, who is he going to be consistently? He hasn't done that so far in the league, and, you know, he's been in the league multiple seasons now. So the NFL waits for no man, right? They give you that opportunity. Trey Tucker's had that opportunity. He hasn't really established himself. Now he's got a guy that's much taller than him and bigger than him at 6'5", 205, and runs the same kind of speed, 4.3. So he is very much like DK Metcalf was for the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, we know Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, Pete Carroll all had success there in Seattle. So if you're averaging 25.4 yards per catch, if you could bring that kind of ability to the NFL and Geno Smith could find a way to consistently hit you, now all of a sudden you're cooking with grease, right? You have Brock Bowers. You saw what he did his rookie year. Jacoby Myers can be a true number 2, and this guy can give you that big play, hit you with that 25, 26 yards, and even stretch the field for the big home run ball, right? The go deep ball that always grew famous with Al Davis's silver and black. So I just like the notes that Ryan McFadden brought up about Dante Thornton Jr. Now, look, this was in mandatory minicamp and OTAs. There were no pads. There was no physicality. He does come from Tennessee. I've always said that that's a harder offense to kind of translate into the NFL. But if he works as hard as I believe he will, as he told me when I had an opportunity to catch up with him, he really could be a guy that we're talking about throughout the course of the season. But, man, that is a real difference maker. Again, Ashton Genty, him being successful won't be a big surprise, but Dante Thornton Jr. could end up being the big surprise, and I just thought it was important to pass that along since Ryan McFadden noticed that as well, that he was a guy that they were consistently trying to get him the ball. And look, Geno Smith, he likes to throw the ball, and he likes to throw the deep ball. And this is something that you'll hear coming up in segment number 2 as I talk with Max Chadwick from PFF. But some of the notes that they had on him, that Geno Smith from 2022 to 2024, his stats with Seattle, 85.3 was his passing grade, which is good for 8th. 63.5% accurate throw rate, which is good for 9th. 77.8% adjusted completion rate, good for 7th. Here we go. 95 big-time throws was 2nd. Guess what? 25.4 yards per catch. That's a big-time throw. And 99.9 is his deep passing grade, which was 1st. So that's the 50-plus yards, right? Those are deep passes. He's very accurate in that. So with that being said, like I said, I think it's a good way to put a bow on the conversation that is Geno Smith. But just remember those numbers because they'll definitely come up in segment number 2 in the conversation that I had with Max Chadwick. But before we get to that, I do want you to hear what the voice of the Silver and Black, Jason Horowitz, had to say about Geno Smith. I had him on my radio show on Tuesday for probably a good 20 minutes. He's always a really good conversation, talking about training camp coming up in a couple of weeks. But then we got into the conversation of Geno Smith. Here's what Jason Horowitz had to say. Check it out. The Raiders went and traded for Geno Smith. They didn't go draft a quarterback high in the draft like I thought they were going to do, and many others did. They went and got Ashton Genty. What kind of opportunity do you see for Geno Smith, knowing that this is his team and his head coach and Pete Carroll, who had success with him in Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, I think people just say, well, you're mid-30s, you're towards the end, and I say the reality is Geno Smith is kind of just starting. Now, I don't know what his body is telling him, and I don't know what his mind is telling him. I know what his contract is saying, which means he got some time here. And I also know that there was a big gap in the middle of his career where he didn't play a whole lot. Mm-hmm. And for a variety of reasons, it didn't go well with the Jets. Then he was the backup with the Giants, and he gets to Seattle. So it's been like 3 or 4 years where he's been the main guy and I've been a really successful Pro Bowler. So I think you look at this not as a 2-year stopgap, which is the reason they don't draft a quarterback at number 6. Putting aside, assuming they didn't see the guy that they liked, whether it was Jackson Dart or Tyler Shuck or Shedeur Sanders or whoever, right? They had many chances to draft all those guys,
right?
And they didn't draft any of them. So there clearly is reason that they believe, hey, this isn't just a 1-year, 2-year thing. This is a thing that could be here for a couple of years, for a few years.
Funny, I talked to Lincoln Kennedy on yesterday, and he was saying that this feels very Rich Gannon-like. Not saying that Geno's going to be Rich Gannon. He turned into a league MVP, but that John Gruden and the Raiders identified him as, hey, this is going to be our starting quarterback. Here's the keys to this team. You go out there, and Lincoln's words, exactly, he proved it to John. He proved it to me that he was a starting quarterback and we could follow his lead. Geno can do that if he takes advantage of it. Do you see some kind of even late season trajectory like that, or late career, I should say, trajectory for Geno Smith?
Well, I think my dates are right on this, but I believe Rich Gannon was like 4th or 5th round in 1987 with the Vikings, and then his MVP year was 2002.
Right.
and I think that was his 3rd or 4th year with the Raiders. So you're talking about a guy who's in his mid to late 30s. There's Geno, a guy who had started elsewhere but really is best known for what he did with the Raiders. You hope that's Geno, because right now, there's a lot to like about what he did in Seattle, right? You go from being someone who was a second-round pick, many thought would be a first-round pick, never worked out where you were, career backup, still in the league, kicking it around, and man, oh man, has he completely changed the narrative. And he's enjoyable to be around. He's a consummate professional, and he's good. And I think that's the most, when you think about it, that's the most important part. Dude is good. And now he's good with weapons, right? A starting tight end that's a Pro Bowler. A first-round running back who people think could be legendary. Again, we have to see it,
right?
But we'll see. A wide receiver in Jacoby Myers who had a 1,000-yard season. Some young guys to go with it. So there's so much to like, but it all has to come together. And, we always talk about it. Unless we start pushing people around up front, then it's not going to matter either.
All Geno all day, baby. That's how we roll here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Really good stuff from Jason Horowitz. Again, kind of going with what Lincoln Kennedy, his broadcast partner, had said about, Rich Gannon and what he was able to bring to the table. Now, look, everything's got to come together just because the timing, the age, just the whole way that he's been in the NFL, they all kind of line up. I mean, Rich put in a lot of work. Rich Gannon worked his tail off, and so Geno Smith's going to have to do that same thing. But everything that I've heard from Pete Carroll since Geno Smith has been part of the Raiders, he's done that, right? First in the building, last to lead the building. His leadership on the field, fantastic, right? Makes a mistake, that's okay. He's back at it, right? I mean, that's what you want from your starting quarterback. It's all got to come together, and the young guys like Adante Thornton Jr., that, again, biggest surprise player from the Raiders in OTAs and mandatory minicamp, guys like that are going to have to step up. Obviously, Brock Bowers is going to have to play at a high level in year 2. You're going to have to get some big-time help and contributions from the run game and Ashton Genty. That's expected. Other guys, Jack Besh, second-round pick out of TCU, he's going to have to step up. You're asking a lot from a lot of young dudes to step up for this whole thing to come together, but it's definitely a possibility. So let's hear what Max Chadwick had to say from Pro Football Focus. Again, he's got the piece out there on their PFF YouTube page. Geno Smith's arm will unlock the Raiders offense. You'll hear all about that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that is FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, right? Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Yeah, sign me up for getting some action in on the game. You can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups. The app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's very easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Same game parlays, yeah, you can do that. You can you watch a bet ride into the 9th inning. FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want you to hear this conversation that I think puts a perfect bow on the Geno Smith conversation that we've had for multiple days here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Max Chadwick, PFF, did a really fantastic piece, a little breakdown there on the PFF.com YouTube page talking about Geno Smith. Geno Smith's arm will unlock the Raiders offense. I gave you the stats in segment number 1, 2022 to 2024 with the Seahawks, 85.3 passing grade, which was 8th. 63.5 accurate throw rate, 9th. 77.8 adjusted completion rate, 7th. 95 big-time throws, 2nd. And 99.9 deep passing grade, which is 1st. So here it is, Max Chadwick from PFF. We started off with me just asking about Geno Smith and how big of an upgrade he is for the Raiders in 2025.
That's a massive one. Honestly, you look at him, and I would argue he's probably a top 15 quarterback in the NFL at the very least. You could even argue a top 10. And you look at the Raiders, what they had last year between Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. I mean, it might have been the worst quarterback situation in the NFL last year, right? So it's a massive upgrade for them. And, something that we talked about in that video was Geno Smith, over his 3 years with the Seattle Seahawks, was arguably the best deep ball thrower in the NFL. And in that same span, the Raiders were one of the worst teams in the NFL pushing the ball down the field, too. So from that aspect, it's going to be a massive, massive upgrade for the Raiders offense.
Yeah, in that video, he was 2nd from 2022 to 2024, 95 in big-time throws. That was good for 2nd. 99.9 deep passing grade, which was 1st. When you draft a guy like Ashton Genty and you expect him to do a lot of heavy lifting, how much do stats like that for Geno Smith help even Ashton because now you can't just load up the box and try to stop the run because that guy could beat you over the top.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why, you look at NFL nowadays and how running backs have really kind of had a renaissance lately and how valuable they are. You look at the Eagles with Saquon Barkley, teams are playing so much more too high coverages against the elite quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow and guys like that because they don't want to get beat over the top, right? So that's why you're kind of seeing the explosive passing games kind of take a dip lately and why running the ball is so important. The problem for the Raiders was, though, teams didn't have to play so much too high against them because they were really afraid of Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew going against them, so they could stack the box and hold the Raiders to the worst rushing grade in the NFL last year. Now you have a superstar in Ashton Jeanty, and now you have a great quarterback who can push the ball down the field in Geno Smith. Teams can't stack the box on Ashton Jeanty, but if you do stack the box on him, Gino Smith can actually beat you over the top too. So if Jeanty was playing for a quarterback like Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, I'd be a little worried because, like you said, teams can stack the box against him and not really have to worry about getting beat over the top. But now with one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL, Gino Smith, you can't stack the box on the Raiders anymore.
What do you imagine that dynamic will be between Geno Smith and outstanding player a year ago, Brock Bowers?
It should be a great one, honestly. And, you kind of look at the Seattle offense, and, they're obviously their strength of their passing game besides Geno Smith was their wide receivers. They had three really good receivers, and, DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and, even an aging Tyler Lockett, too. The Raiders don't really have that wide receiver. What they do have is arguably a top 2 to 3 tight end in the NFL already in Brock Bowers, who I think will be the number one tight end in the NFL very, very soon after the kind of rookie year he had in the college, the kind of collegiate production we saw from him at Georgia, too. So, I think, it's not a matter of, he can't throw to tight ends or he won't throw to tight ends. Just really didn't have the opportunity to do so that much at Seattle. He actually, when he was targeting tight ends, he was actually very effective last year for the Seahawks. So I have no doubt about it that he and Brock Bowers will form a very lethal connection. And with a better quarterback in Geno Smith, Brock Bowers could become the best tight end in the NFL next year as a second-year player.
How do you see Chip Kelly as almost a game changer at the offensive coordinator position for the Raiders?
Yeah, I think it was a really good hire. He did a great job at Ohio State last year, kind of getting around the weaknesses of the Ohio State team, especially in the playoff where their offensive line was really, really beat up, and they got around it and started playing at least average enough play for them to win a national title last year. There's no denying he's a really good play caller, right? He's been at his entire football career, whether it be as the Eagles head coach or in the college ranks too. So I think he'll be a really good play caller for Pete Carroll on that coaching staff, and I'm excited to see what he could do with a superstar running back, Ashton Jeanty, a top 10-ish quarterback in Geno Smith, a really good offensive line in my opinion too, and like I said, a top 2 to 3 tight end in the NFL already in Brock Bowers.
One of the knocks that he had while he was in Seattle, struggled in the red zone and turned the ball over. We saw his 21 touchdowns, 15 picks from a year ago. How much was that just Geno Smith trying to do too much?
Yeah, it was a little bit of that, and the Seattle really relied on him a lot last year. I think, when you get in the red zone now, hopefully a guy like Ashton Jeanty can help punch in those touchdowns too and not have to be overly relying on Geno Smith too. But you're right, that is one drawback in this game right now is that he's just not a very good red zone passer, not as precise as you need to be in the red zone. He's a lot better when actually there's a lot more yards to play with for him and for him to actually show why he's one of the best deep ball throwers. You can't really have too many deep balls when you're in the red zone, right? Because deep balls are 20-plus yards. So that's really the one question mark with Geno that I have right now. But, with a guy like Brock Bowers, who's a really good red zone threat, and like I said, Ashton Jeanty too, and a really good offensive line, that should be a lot more helpful. It's just whether or not the Raiders can find some receivers that can really help them out too.
Let me ask you this. We know Patrick Mahomes, number one quarterback in the AFC West and very easily the number one quarterback in the NFL. How do you see the other quarterbacks in the AFC West stacking up from Herbert, Bo Nix, and now Geno Smith?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty clear ranking for me. I'm still a big believer in Justin Herbert. I think he's at least a top 5 to 6 quarterback in the NFL, so I would put him pretty easily number 2 in that ranking. And then Geno Smith is pretty easily number 3 for that ranking as a top 10-ish, maybe top 12 quarterback in football. And then Bo Nix, even after a really good rookie year, he's still more like a top 20-ish quarterback in the NFL right now too. So I think it's a pretty clear ranking for me at least of Mahomes, then Herbert, then Geno, and then Bo Nix.
Getting back to the conversation about Geno Smith, and again, the video is out right now. Geno Smith's arm will unlock the Raiders' offense. How much does confidence help? And why I ask that is Pete Carroll chose to make the move and go trade for Geno Smith. Obviously, he had familiarity with him and he had success with him in Seattle. How much confidence now is Geno Smith going to have saying, this is not a team that I'm joining and I could fight for the job. This is actually my job?
Yeah, I think there is probably a lot of confidence there, right? I think Pete Carroll does a really great job of instilling confidence in his players, too. He's a great motivator as a head coach. And, you look at, what they're building in Las Vegas. It's really been remarkable with how they've kind of rebuilt that offense this offseason, right? Getting a guy like Gino Smith, getting Ashton Jeanty. I mean, the Raiders were one of the worst teams in terms of throwing the football and also one of the worst teams in terms of running the football last year, and they improved both those dramatically by adding Geno Smith and Ashton Jeanty. So, yeah, I still think wide receiver is a question mark in Las Vegas right now. They still got to add some more talented players in that receiving core. I do like the addition of Jack Besh, and we'll see if Dante Thornton can do a little bit as a rookie this year. But I think that receiving core needs to be improved a little bit. But other than that, I mean, I really like what Las Vegas is building right now in the offense.
As he's trying to take control of this team, what do you feel like he has to do, probably like what he has to work the most on to try to establish this as his team and show him that he's capable of leading them in a very tough division that is the AFC West?
Yeah, I think what we talked about earlier is just get more precise in the red zone, right? Kind of finish off drives is what I would say too, because I think that's just where he needs to improve the most. And when the field gets tighter in that red zone, can you make the big time throws and thread the needle and make and score touchdowns when you need to, right? Because I think that's really important for any offense in the NFL is to take advantage of those red zone trips. But listen, I mean, Geno Smith, it's been such a cool development in his career. I mean, after his initial couple seasons in the NFL with the Jets, I never really thought Geno Smith would ever get a shot to be an NFL quarterback ever again. He kind of lasted in the league for a very long time as a backup and then finally got a shot to start in Seattle. And he was fantastic with the Seahawks over the last 3 years, right? So it's been really one of the cooler stories in the NFL, just his kind of development as a quarterback over the last, after, 8 years basically not being a starter. It's cool to see him kind of develop into a top 10 to 12 quarterback like a lot of people thought he could be coming out of West Virginia.
Real quick, as I let you go, Ashton Jeanty, how does his game translate from Boise State to the National Football League, where obviously the competition is a lot stronger?
I think very well. I think Ashton Jeanty, I put him up there with the best running back prospects I've ever seen, up there with Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, and running back is one of those positions where if you're really good in college, you're going to be really good in the NFL. It's not a lot of variance at running back, I think. So Jeanty had one of the greatest college careers we've ever seen at running back, one of the greatest seasons ever we've seen at running back this past year, too. His game will translate very well. I think he's going to be a top 5 at least running back in the NFL very soon.
Funny, ever since the Raiders have acquired Geno Smith, there's been multiple people that have put really good articles out about Geno. We've had many interviews about Geno, and I don't think that I realized how well respected and how good he really was until we start doing a lot more deep diving. And that's what I love a platform like this and multiple platforms is that we can do that. We can have the time to do the research, right, and pick the brains of the ones that are focusing in even closer. And you know what Max said there when I asked him about Bo Nix, he said, or I asked him about the rankings of the quarterbacks in the AFC West, he said it's not even close. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes, number 1. Justin Herbert, clearly 2. Geno Smith, clearly 3. Bo Nix, he would put in the 20s. Right around 20th rank, he'd put Geno Smith 15th and maybe even 10th, top 12, top 10, whatever the case may be. So then I go back to the conversation we've been having about when do the Raiders have an advantage over the quarterbacks, right? In every one of their games, game 1 through game 17, right? Obviously, they play the Broncos twice with Bo Nix. Geno Smith, clearly an advantage, according to Max Chadwick, yeah. So then I had 9 games where the Raiders had the advantage. If you take the 2 games, the Broncos, that's 11 games. That doesn't mean they're going to win 11 games, but they have the advantage at the quarterback position, or at least are even, which I know a lot of people would take even being even with, the quarterback matchup as opposed to just knowing that you are going into that game and your quarterback is not as good as the opponent. So I think that's very promising for the Raiders, and I definitely believe it's promising for Raider Nation. We'll hear from you next. Your calls and texts, 707-654-4693. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts. We're off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with a text from Big Fish Raider. So what's up, doggy? Big Fish Raider, one more time to talk to you about what I think Pete Carroll's biggest challenges will be. That's blocking out the noise. I don't know where the negativity came from, but our defense has carried the team the past 2 seasons. Yes, I know the numbers aren't great, but that's what happens when you don't play complementary football and your offense leaves you out there for 45 minutes a game. Our defense didn't lose a game 2 years ago to the Vikings 3-0. Our defense didn't lose 4 yards on 4 plays after picking off Patrick Mahomes last year and returning it to the 2-yard line. Pete Carroll needs to remind these guys they don't suck the way people are talking. And then once the season starts and you start to see results, you have to block out when everyone starts telling you how good you are. This is a young team, and young people are impressionable. Pete needs to keep these kids level-headed and only caring about what is said in our building. Appreciate you, homie. Peace. That's from Big Fish Raider. Blocking out all the noise. Players, we hear them say it all the time. Max Crosby says it all the time. We're not listening to anybody outside the building. But we all know that they're listening, they're reading, they're tweeting, all that stuff. They hear everything. They absolutely do. I know that they do their best, and it's very hard with all the different ways that you can hear the noise. Social media, the radio, podcasts, whatever, TV, whatever the case may be, right? There's so many different ways that you can get it. You get the alerts on your phone, right? So, I mean, notifications pop up. It just is what it is. So it's very hard to block out all the noise, but, you know, keeping this team level-headed is a great point that you bring up, right? Don't let them get too high off success, and don't let them get too low on failures, because there's going to be a combination of both throughout the course of the season. That's the inevitable. That happens for every team. So I think you bring up a really good point there, and I think the defense has a chance to be good. There are some questions. Linebacking core, obviously the secondary is going to be young, right? There is some turnover. Will Christian Wilkins be there available early to start the season, or will he be a guy that has to get worked into the rotation, right? I mean, there's some questions there, but I definitely think they have the opportunity to be good, and they need to be so they can play exactly what you said, complimentary football. Thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Dog, got the 509. He's calling to talk about a couple storylines that he believes will be big ones for the Raiders heading into training camp. Here he is, Raider Dog, got the 509.
Q, this is Raider Dog out of the 509. I was listening to your top 3 storylines for the Raiders going into this season with training camp 2 weeks away. Anyway, my thought is that I think the biggest storyline is going to be Colt Miller and Jacoby Myers. You can separate them into 2 storylines or into 1, because it's basically the same thing with the contracts coming up. You know, and they always Spytek and Carroll kept talking about they want people that want to be Raiders and want to stick with the team and so on and so forth, and homegrown talent. Well, Colt Miller definitely hits all those points. I don't know what's going on behind the scene, as nobody else does either, really, but besides those people. But it seems like to me that could be a huge development, especially if there's a holdout involved and everything else. Could bring a lot of drama to take away from the cohesiveness of training camp and getting everybody to learn the new system and so on and so forth. And you know as well as I do that when somebody holds out of training camp, it also affects their play when the season starts. So I think that's, to me, is the biggest storyline. I understand Christian Wilkerson and his injury, but you know what? Injuries, they happen, and we don't like it. And sure, having him on that defensive line makes it a monster line. But at the same time, he's doing all he can to be, what he needs to be and do what he needs to do. So my concern is more into the Colt Miller, Jacoby Myers. They've proven that they want to be Raiders, and their conversation is strong that they want to stay with the team. And I think it's time for John Spytek to step up and make that happen. And I'm not saying and sell the farm to keep them, but I'm also saying be fair and make them a Raider for life. All right, have a good day, Q. Thanks for all you do. Bye.
Doggy Dog, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And Colton Miller and Jacoby Myers and their contracts. Now, I think that that's a storyline, but I don't think it's like the biggest storyline, right? It's obviously something that you have to pay attention to, but it just feels like with these guys in particular, and maybe I'm reading the situation wrong, the way that Colton Miller spoke to us at mandatory minicamp and said, hey, this is who I am. I'm showing up. I'm going to be here. I'm hoping to get a contract extension. I want to be a Raider for life. And Jacoby Myers pretty much said the same thing. I don't see them holding out, not to mention they have to prove who they are to these guys. Remember, this is a new staff, new GM, new head coach. They don't know how valuable someone is. Something that I learned from watching Shark Tank, and I love to watch Shark Tank. You can't go into the tank with an evaluation on yourself that may be higher than they evaluate you at, right? So Colton Miller can't say, hey, man, I'm a guy that should be a top-paid left tackle in the league, and then John Spytek and Pete Carroll say, yeah, we don't see that value. right? I mean, there's no Pro Bowls on your resume. There's no this, there's no that. Struggled early in the season last year. Like, they don't know the value because they haven't been in the building. So this very well could end up being a situation for both guys, Myers and Miller, that they've got to prove themselves. So when they step into the Shark Tank and they come with their evaluation, when they say, hey, we'll give you 5% of our 5% of our company for $200,000, like, whoa, that's a lot of money, right? But then you prove what your evaluation is. So I don't see them holding out. Like I said, I could be completely naive about the situation and wrong, but I just don't read those two. I'd be concerned about other guys. Like, I'd have been concerned about Max Crosby because he was very adamant that contract situation had to get worked out. But now that got worked out, first and foremost, I'm good. I think that Colton Miller and Jacoby Myers will be just fine. They're in the last year of their deals. I know Miller has no guaranteed money, and I know that Jacoby Myers has minimal money, guaranteed. So we'll see how it all plays out. I do think they'll get extensions sooner rather than later, though. Thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Connor in Florida. So what's up, Q? It's Connor from Florida. I got quite the text for you. Over the last couple of months, you've talked about Pete Carroll and how he's a culture changer, and his resume truly shows, all the way from his days with the Jets, Patriots, Trojans, won 2 national championships, Seahawks, won a Super Bowl, and now at the Raiders. He, along with John Spytek and Tom Brady, are slowly but surely recreating what Al Davis wanted, and that was a culture that can not only thrive, but sustain. As respective fans of both the Alabama Crimson Tide, meaning you and me, meaning you and me being a fan of the Georgia Bulldogs, we both know how important it is for creating an environment and a culture that players want to be a part of and coaches that they want to play for. Kirby Smart and Nick Saban are perfect examples. Just like you, us Raider fans are tired of letting commitment to excellence, the will to win, and just win, baby, just words you see on a shirt or the Raiders facility. Love the show, even loving the Raiders squad as a little something extra for the Locked On podcast. Keep doing what you're doing as always. Just win, baby. That's Connor in Florida. Thanks so much for the text. And yeah, man, Bama and Georgia, huh? Right? Those are fantastic programs in the SEC. And yeah, big fan of what they do at Alabama. And obviously what Kirby Smart is doing at Georgia is fantastic as well. But you bring up a great point about the environment, the fact that players want to play there. Players want to go there. They want to thrive, and they want to keep that tradition alive. That's what Pete Carroll is trying to build. And he's done it everywhere he goes. And, it's up to him now, and it's up to John Spytek to get the ingredients for them to be able to do it with the silver and black. I think they'll get it done, but until we actually see it, we don't know. But I do feel good about the direction moving forward. And I know we've said that before, but like you said, the proof of concept, the resume says that it can be done. Thanks so much for the text. Appreciate you. Thanks for the compliment on the Raiders Squad Show, the new show to the Locked On Podcast Network. Up next, got a quick call from Logan from PA. Speaking of the Raiders Squad Show, he's calling to talk about the show, a new edition, and, how he's excited about what it brings to the table. Quick call from Logan in PA.
Hey, Q, this is Logan from PA. I just got done listening to the Squad Show. I wanted to say I like that you finally came around to my 10-win prediction. You didn't even know how you got there, but you did get there. But no, I wanted to say I really, really like the new Squad Show. And anybody listening that doesn't watch or listen to the Squad Show, y'all should definitely check it out. Q and Big Link are hilarious on there. So keep doing that Squad Show, Q. I like that a lot. Out.
Logan, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. You're right. I have no idea how I got to 10 wins. It's so funny when we got to the end of, episode number 3 and we were going through the schedule and I was like, wait, hold on. In my head, I feel like I got to 10 wins. What did I do? You're right. I don't know how I did that. I still think 8 to 9 is reasonable and expected, but maybe my brain is telling me something else. And I think because I added that extra game at the end with the Chiefs, that week 18 being the first one that they're going to win in Allegiant, maybe that's how I got to 10. I don't know, but you're absolutely right. I do not know how I got to 10, but I did. The Raider Squad Show is good. We've only done 3 shows so far. We will be back at it this morning, 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, depending on when you're listening to this show. But Chantel Chan, Lincoln Kennedy, and myself, and Chantel does a great job getting her Howard Cosell on, right? And me and Lincoln, we're always great together because, well, Big Link is fantastic, and obviously me and him are really good friends. So, Logan, thanks so much for the compliments on the show. Definitely appreciate that. And somehow, some way, I got to 10 wins. So I can't tell you how I did it, though. Thanks again. Up next, got a text, and I just got a couple more. Text from DJ Raider in Arizona. It says, hey, Q, DJ Raider from Arizona, 2 things. First, I really enjoyed your bit on quarterback comparisons. I agree with all but 2. Daniels and Nix. I know that sounds crazy, but the sophomore jinx after a successful freshman campaign is a real thing. they both will backpedal this season. Second, as July 8th was a significant date for my boy Ken Stabler. Was really hoping to hear a shout out for the Snake from me. He donned the silver and black during my first decade of being a Raider fan, and is the sole reason why I became a Raider for life. It was a different era for sure, but one that made no apologies for who they were and lived with no excuses and no regrets. Keep doing what you do. Locked on for life. Go Raiders. Just win, baby. And yeah, that was a passing that just slipped past me. I apologize for that with the Snake, Kenny Stabler, who obviously got inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame after he passed away, which is too late. I hate when that happens. We saw that happen with Cliff Branch as well, and I'm hoping we don't see that happen with Lester Hayes. I'm hoping that Lester Hayes gets in before he passes away. We saw Tom Flores get in, thankfully, and he's still with us, so that's great. But so many times these great players, they don't get in until after they pass away, so don't have an opportunity to smell the flowers. As far as Daniels, I think Daniels will be fine. I really do. Now, you're right. The sophomore slump could be a real thing with him. I just think that he's going to be fine. But we know with defensive coordinators, they get an eye on what these guys do really well, and they start to hone in on that, and they slow them down. So, obviously, they're going to have a lot to prove. But, they did get one game away from the Super Bowl his rookie year. Bo Nix, he could easily be the very same thing. He could, continue to evolve from what he did his rookie year. But as we heard from Max Chadwick, he still had Bo Nix ranked in the 20th. Around 20 for, rankings as far as quarterbacks go. I do think that he's really good for what Sean Payton wants, and he proved that year one. I know he made some mistakes, but again, he was a rookie. They still found their way into the playoffs. We'll see. I didn't give him a whole lot of credit going into the draft, so I want to make sure that I do that now. I don't want to, take his flowers away. I think he exceeded my expectations. That's for sure. Can he continue to grow? Has he hit his ceiling? Oh, that's, we'll find out sooner rather than later. But thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. Always RIP to the Snake, Kenny Stabler. We'll close things out with a call from 305 Key. He's calling to talk about the Geno Smith conversation with the dust-up that happened at that 7-on-7 from a guy who is, from a South Florida. So it's a South Florida point of view. Here he is, 305 Key.
What's up, Q? 305 Key from the bottom. Trying to catch up on last week's shows. I ran into the Geno episode. I listened. I laughed. I thought, yeah, that's South Florida talk. I wasn't going to call. I said, yeah, you got it. After Gino made his response saying that's how we talk. But I heard Smooth Rader's response, and I just had to pick the phone up. So, not trying to make a back and forth, but I do want to express my opinion because Smooth Raider did express his. And I would say this. I am from South Florida. I am from Dade County. And when I saw that video, the first thing I thought was that boy talked just how he used to talk, how we used to talk. That's what it is. When we get on the lines, when we play a football game, basketball game, whatever it is, once the competition comes out, that's how we talk. That is how we talk. And I don't think nothing wrong with it. I don't. I don't necessarily agree with he should not talk how everybody else talks. We are a product of our environment where we grew up. A lot of times we do outgrow it. Sometimes we don't. I do believe Geno's outgrown it. I think he understands, and I think you would know and understand this. He has the ability to code switch. So Geno is, yes, very eloquent in front of the camera. Geno does have a great head on his shoulders. But when he's between those lines, that's the guy I want. I want that guy from South Florida. That's the hungry guy. That's the guy that didn't write back. So if people try and take that from him, right, you're kind of stripping him of his identity. That's just my opinion, right? Because that's who he is at his core. So I want that guy to come out on the field because that's where it was, on the field. He didn't expect cameras to be rolling, no. But nothing he was doing was in a negative way. That's how we converse. That's how we converse between those lines. So I think it's okay. Look, when people get in certain situations, certain things come out of them. And there was nothing he was saying to the kids or to the people on the sideline or whoever he was talking to that was meant to be offensive. And it was just talk. I'm sure all of them were talking the same way. So that's it. I got about 15 seconds, so I'm gonna wrap it up. But that's it. I just want to share my opinion from somebody who's from South Florida, who grew up in that environment and who understands. So thank you again. I'm out. Just win, baby.
Thanks so much for the call, my man. Really appreciate you. Like the points on Gino, who he is. I do think he's a respectable guy, and that's just from the very few interactions that I've had with him, which, again, is very minimal. So I don't know him like that. Like I said, I only talked to him a couple times, but I do appreciate hearing from both sides of things, right? Hearing different perspectives on what, you kind of interpreted or thought from a 30-second video that's floating around social media. I guess the ultimate lesson learned here is there's always a camera rolling, right? If Gino learned anything from this situation, there's always a camera rolling. So be careful what you say when you do it because, well, somebody can talk about it. Thanks so much for the call. Like I said, it's always great to hear from you. Got a text from Peter in Winnipeg. We'll close out the show with this. He says, hey, Q, it's Peter from Winnipeg. Love the new show you guys started. Continuing yesterday's topic on stories to watch, two big things I'll be watching for are how the O-line plays and how the young guys on defense perform. I'm not overly concerned about the defense. Coach Graham seems to be able to make things work well if the team doesn't get decimated with injuries. One solution or idea I've thought about is if there's a trade out there to upgrade the offensive line. I hate to assume things, but one would imagine the Raiders will have at least one or two comp picks for next year. Maybe they could try to make a move for a starter. Anyway, hope all is well, my man. Go Raiders. That's from Peter in Winnipeg. And, something that Lincoln Kennedy brought up on the Raiders squad show. If there is a move that would be made, he would like to see them add some more depth to the offensive line. I think that they have some good depth, but we always know that guys get banged up in the trenches. So I would have no problem with them making some more additions to the offensive line. Thanks so much for that. Thanks for the compliments on the new show. Speaking of the new show, we'll be back at it again today. As I mentioned, Chantel Chan, Lincoln Kennedy, and myself, the Raider Squad show for today. Expectations for Jackson Powers Johnson, Pete Carroll's culture change, how long it will take a shift in the culture and guys buying in, and who on the defense needs to have a prove-it season. That's all conversation that we'll be having on today's Raiders Squad show, 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, live stream, 1 hour long, 1 hour strong. If you're part of the Locked On Raiders podcast, or you subscribe to the YouTube page, or you subscribe to the podcast in general, you get everything that you need to get and have everything that you need to have in order to get the show. So thanks so much for that. Do appreciate you. So that's going to do it for today's show. Coming up tomorrow, we'll get more calls and texts. We'll get more news and notes. We'll start to turn our attention to Ashton Jeanty. Realistic expectations for him in 2025. I'll explain why I want to talk about that. We'll do it all coming up tomorrow on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.